It sure is quiet here.
On the Western Front. 5 years of the Flick Lab at this point, recording wise. Hooray!
I kind of can remember the old days, the early days when we were thinking about that. Oh my god, the podcast will die within its seventh episode.
Yeah, we carried on like soldiers, I suppose. But I think the true heroes here are someone else tonight than us. But nevertheless, yeah, 5 years.
Basically, somehow this time around, I completely actually forgot that.
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah. The 5 year anniversary is upon us.
Alright, but tonight we're gonna look at the young men fighting, look at the women crying, look at the young men dying, the way they've always done before.
Yeah, today we are celebrating the Frenchies.
Right. There was certain someone who said that there are no true anti-war movies. There might be a kernel of truth to that.
Yeah, even with today's topic, and I know that we are going to land on this, seeing what's well, fuck it. The title already spoils it, so all quite on the Western Front. Like, I'm fully aware that the novel and these movies, all three of them, they have a legacy as this great anti-war art, so to say. I have to confess, I haven't read the novel, so I can't speak for the novel. But when it comes to the film adaptations as the all-time greatest, the true anti-war films, I kind of have to say that, the judges, the jury is still somewhat on the benches regarding that notion. I'm still somewhat hesitant to actually give the statement that, that the film adaptations of All Quiet would be the true anti-war movies.
If we want to talk about the novel, I kind of went through it in a flash, and it's indeed.
Yeah, I know that you managed to actually do your background work way better than me when coming to this episode.
I don't know, that's very kind of you, but let's see about that. But yeah, the novel was written by Erich Maria Remarque, and this is the most read German novel of all time, as far as I am aware.
Yeah, if I've understood correctly, this is like one of those novels that are mandatory reading in Germany at some age.
Yeah, and there sure is, and for understandable reasons, a lot of this anti-war teaching in the schools. So this might be part of the anti-war curriculum. Well, I don't have anything to back this up, but that kind of might also backfire on you. If you do anti-war lessons, then there's bound to be a bunch of those nitwits who will just turn it around and oppose the teacher and go full on the wrong way.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I have for quite some time I've actually thought that the best way to teach anti-war message to youngsters, kids, teenagers is to just to pack the whole bunch together and send them to the front.
There you go.
That's a segue. That's a segue to today's movies.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because these are experiences that cannot be adequately described, it seems, and cannot be adequately recreated for someone who is not and will not be and hasn't been any part of any kind of a major or real life war conflict. They always have to, I guess, try their luck a little bit more and see what it's all about, and then back to the starting point. Oh, war kind of sucks.
Yeah. Or then you find out that it's actually great fun and good for your well-being and physical health, or that running and jumping and diving to cover Who am I to say? I've never actually tried it myself.
There's that.
Can't give an objective truth that war sucks.
There's that. But every exercise comes with its hazards. But this book, this novel, has a sequel called The Road Back from 1930, written or released 2 years later. 1928 was the release of the All Quiet on the Western Front. And there was also a subsequent movie adaptation of The Road Back, done in 1936. I'm not quite sure if there's other adaptations. I think I'm only aware of this one. That was, I guess, supposed to be some kind of a following from the 1930 movie.
But I didn't even know that All Quiet had a sequel.
Yeah. But not directed by the same guy. And this is also a book, the All Quiet on the Western Front, a book banned and burned in Nazi Germany. Surprise, surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And the writer said book happened to be stateless from 1938 to 1947 until he finally settled into the United States and spent the rest of his days there. A World War I veteran indeed. And I understand quite a bit of what he's writing about. No surprise there, is based on some of his harrowing experiences. And when it comes to the actual story of the 1928 novel, I would say that it is extremely similar to the 1930 and the 1979 movie adaptations. Perhaps closer to the 1930 movie. There are no huge differences plot-wise, and chronological-wise, the scenes do pretty much exactly the same tricks there. Goes in the same order, same plot beats. The biggest one, of course, the one film that does the biggest changes here is obviously the 2022 version, which we will get to later. But yeah, no big surprises there. Of course, when you're reading a novel, you will get more inside the head of the character, yada yada yada. There is a more meditative quality. It's coming from it's like the written word or the thoughts of Paul Baumer in the book. So he's kind of the character that we follow, of course, there as well, and he is the active voice there. There are some things that I noticed that I did not see in the film. You might be able to correct me on that one, but there was a scene when he goes in the novel he takes leave, and he's somewhere in the city, and there's one military officer who stops him on his tracks, saying something like, "What are you doing?" And he is agitated about something unsoldier man-like that he is doing, and he immediately proceeds to correct Paul Baumer's ways and proceeds to demand him to take a couple of steps forward and backward and things like that. And inside, Paul is fuming, and he concludes that ruined his evening. And if I remember correctly, then he proceeds to go to see the bunch of other civilian guys who pretend to know everything about the war, and he feels quite despisive of these people.
Yeah, that moment is omniscient from the film adaptations. The best we get from that one, like the film adaptations do have the scene where he meets the older men in film adaptations. I don't know how it's in the books, but in the films they are framed as the friends of Baumer's father, and they are in beer garden, the whole lot of them, and the old geezers start to go about how the war is supposed to go. But that's as far as, that moment, or that the scene that you described from the book exists in the film adaptations. When it comes to what was it, a village cop, an officer who he meets.
I don't remember his rank, but yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, that moment, that does not exist in any of the film adaptations.
Right. When it comes to that scene with the father's friends, I would say that in the novel also that the way that they are talking to Paul is more kind of aggressive and kind of know-it-all like. Sort of that there's more things that they say to him, something like, "Yeah, but you wouldn't know that because you're just in this particular part of the trenches. You wouldn't see the full picture, man." Things like that.
That does exist
Okay.
in the film adaptations. However, it's a question of the theme that the films have, or the essence that the film adaptations do have. Both the 1930 and 1979 adaptations, they both have that scene and they behave in similar way. However, the tone of the 1930 films is kind of lighter, and as a result, when they have the know-it-all attitude and when they are, in the essence, when they are looking down on Paul and his experiences and his, practical knowledge of how the war is, it's framed more in a jovial, one might even say comedical fashion. Like one guy even pulls out the map of Germany-French border and starts to like point the map, which is not directly slapstick, but weirdly comical way to present the moment. 1979 version is more serious toned, and it does have the line that, oh, but you are in that part of the trench, you wouldn't know to see the big picture. However, no special attention is paid to what is being said or that moment, which makes it kind of a just a piece of dialogue in a amongst 50 other lines of dialogue. So it's kind of easy to miss what is being said and the tone how it's being said in the 1979 version.
Right, interesting. When it comes to that kind of a more lightweight feel of the 1930 movie, maybe that is slightly pushing it. Yeah, there is that more of a comedic feel in some of the scenes and overacting that is typical for the time, so that's nothing special to note. But I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's, I'm not claiming that you are, but I wouldn't say that it is like overly comedic. If I compare this to something like The Unknown Soldier from, well, it was filmed quite a bit later, but I would say that the original Unknown Soldier from Finland is more, in the lack of a better word, rillumarei, kind of this happy-go-lucky than this film is.
And there, my man, you actually hit a really good point. Because something that I noticed when going through the three adaptations, like we did with Unknown previously, is that with the adaptations of All Quiet, we kind of land ourselves in the Unknown Soldier situation, where you have tonally three different type of films in almost, I would say, exactly the same way how you did with The Unknown Soldier. You have the first one, the old black and white film, which is the most lightweight, most light-hearted, most comedical, most adventurous. I'm not saying that it's, like you pointed out, I'm not saying that All Quiet 1930 version is as light-hearted and as much of a rillumarei movie as was the original Edwin Linus Unknown. But it's kind of in the same vein. That there is a, like, when you watch these movies, it's obvious to say that well, 1930 version does have, it has most of the funny scenes. It has funny side characters there. It has downright comedical scenes. Few, but they do exist there. And like it was with Mohlberg's version of The Unknown, the 1979 version of All Quiet is basically the intended contradiction to the original film adaptation. 1979 version is the gritty, dirty, war is hell, you get to see the blood finally take on the source material, and then you have the 2022 version, which is, well, essentially the Oscar bait. It's the glossy, shiny, Hollywood-esque version of the story, and I'm not saying that automatically means that, film bad or this better than that, but much like we did take notice that this is what happened with The Unknown, and in my opinion, the exact same bloody thing happens with All Quiet.
That's an interesting comparison, my friend, because Even like technical wise, you could say that there is similarities. 1930 version of All Quiet on the Western Front, yeah, black and white, gorgeously shot. I would say.
Yeah, best cinematography, I would say, of these
Hands
films.
freaking down.
It is a fight with the Netflix Oscar bait 2022 version.
Hands freaking down. Yes. 2 points about those comparisons. The 1930, or let's say the first version of Unknown Soldier and All Quiet on the Western Front. I think those are movies that, number one, want to remain somewhat clearly patriotic to the audience. And number two, they want to be protective of audience. They don't want to go all gritty and slimy and dirty and bombastic, explosive, all that. At least not only. It wants to keep, basically the roughest violence off screen, and it wants to have all those lightest moments. And like you said, it kind of wants to have this balancing, showing you also that you can have funny to fun at the army as well, while there's some harrowing moments here and there. But yeah, it's kind of this tug of war between fun times and girls and things like that, and sunny days. Whereas then the 1979 version, I would say even technically it kind of reminds me of Mollberg's work. But would I dare to say even kind of this TV-esque quality is something that might bind them together. And then similarly to these third versions, these 2000 versions of both respectively, they are more of this kind of a huge blockbuster cinematic style that we see recently. Trying to look expensive, I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, and with that, when it comes to the cinematography of the 1979 version and Mollberg's Unknown, I kind of have to agree with you there. Mollberg's version was notable for the fact that it was like Mollberg took the you are there in the situation approach to the limit. Huge chunks of the movie were handheld, and there were weird goofs that resulted from this because Mollberg refused to have the closely protected and guarded shooting sets around him when he was shooting the films. There are scenes where you can see the boom mic, or you can see the extra hands in the edges of the frame.
Yeah.
But that was all part of or those were mistakes that were result of Mollberg's "God damn it, you will be there" approach of filmmaking. Now, the 1979 version of All Quiet, it's not as hardcore in its approach as Mollberg was. In my opinion, now I didn't check out how it exactly was shot, but it's not as handheld. And by God, there are no goofs in the images of the 1979 version like we had with Mollberg. But the aim, in my opinion, is the same. Just like Mollberg, the 1979 All Quiet wants to be the film where you are in the trenches and where you are with the hecticity of the moment.
Yeah, something of the sort. And coming back to those shots in 1930 version, yeah, beautiful shots like the classroom, and all of those shots I really like that were shot through the window for some reason. It's a nice composition and kind of shows you like an overall view of the town, what is happening, and I just and also very dynamic shots in the movie for the time, in my opinion. There's a lot of variety in how the camera moves and works and wiggles around the characters. I think there was a lot of attention given to the composition, and very much worthy of the praise for sure that it got during the time. And even though there are sound effects that sound, the sound is actually very real sounding. Obviously there are some bad cuts and things like that, but it doesn't matter. There is something about the energy of the actors in the war scenes that kind of really sells it to me at points. I think it looks like real war. it sounds like real war. The people and their screams sometimes are pretty good goddamn acting.
Yeah, I'm kind of two ways about that. I'm not disagreeing with the point that it's really well acted. It absolutely is. Like you mentioned, it perhaps at times a bit overacted, perhaps a bit theatrical, but that was the filmmaking of the times. That's acceptable here. So overall, I would say it's a really well acted, but when it comes to, actually, in my opinion, somehow from these two, well, basically from all the three movie adaptations, the 1979 version, for some odd reason, was the one that captured me the most.
Oh no!
Like I'm not saying that in the sense that the 1979 version would have been better acted. It's well acted, but I do feel that the 1930 version beats it in acting. I would say the 2022 version beats it in acting. The performances are the best in those two versions. And the fact that the 1979 version, it did have film stars. It did have film actors in it. But a lot of the actors came from TV movie and TV series backgrounds. Like, for example, the 1979 version's Paul Baumer, who is not a film star, he's a TV actor. And that kind of does affect and kind of like bleeds into the smorgasbord of performances that you get in the 1979 version. So, absolutely, I admit that when it comes to acting, the 1979 version perhaps is the most uneven in it, what it's offering, and not the best acted of the three adaptations. But for some reason, it actually is the one that hooked me in. And I kind of can't understand what it is. Perhaps we can figure it out today.
Yeah.
But it's not like a technical aspect. It's not the shots, because it's not the best shot movie. It's not the acting, because it's not the best acted version of the material. But somehow, I actually was more on board with the 1979 version than I was, for example, with the 1930 version.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things to like different things to like in all these versions. Something to still kind of ponder about the whole 1930 version on my part is because the compositions of shots are great. Many of them are static shots, and they are great. They are kind of like paintings sometimes, and I think it tremendously helps how you can see and experience what is going on. I think it's very clear to follow the film at points thanks to that, because there's repeat shots, there's repeat angles, repeat cutbacks. For example, when Paul is in the foxhole or what have you, and we experience him being trapped in that hole by repeat shots of his expression, and then in between you have running soldiers and bombardment, and he's there all alone and scared, and then the Frenchie comes into the trenchy only several minutes later. So yeah, just moments like that where we are just getting accustomed to the shots and the spaces. That's what I really enjoyed about the 1930 version. It's not like complete and utter chaos like in 2022 version. Not saying that, it's particularly unclear to follow, but I did enjoy that kind of stay put mentality of the 1930 version, which of course for sure is for budgetary reasons, technical reasons of those times as well. But heck, I enjoyed it when, for example, there's the classroom scene. Paul has his leave and he comes back to his old teacher to, unfortunately, not give any encouraging war propaganda for the teacher's class. But yeah, this whole scene, it's shot in basically 3 different shots. There's the shot that focuses on the teacher and his desk. There's the shot that focuses on the door from where Paul is coming to the classroom, and where we see Paul all the time, except for maybe that other shot, which then it turns back into the teacher shot. And then there is the full shot of the whole class and the people in it. And then there are, yeah, sure, there's some, close-ups on faces of people giving their, shocked expressions on what Paul is saying. So the simplicity of it, it's pretty to look at.
Yeah, and I credit where credit is due. 1930 version does have the best lecture scene of all three movies.
I think so, yeah.
In fact, it has a lot of the scenes that it has are the best versions of the said scene in between all the three versions. It's also the one that has the most iconic scenes. Like, for example, the two hands
yeah,
grabbing the barbed wire, the two severed hands grabbing the barbed wire, which is one of those scenes that whenever somebody makes a YouTube video about war movies, or you go into film school lecture X, you are bound to see that scene. It's that iconic. And those are all in the 1930 version.
It's also the film that has the most mustaches. Specifically French mustaches. If you're a Frenchie, you have a mustache. Period.
But what I was actually counting in for being a sticking point for you, my friend, was the fact that 1930 version is also the one that straight up reuses and recycles images. Like I don't mean that they have a similar type of situation that they just have reshot almost identical scene. I mean it literally reuses images. And it's also the version that has, I would say, the weirdest editing goofs of all these All Quiets.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, technically wise, 1930 version is the one that where you most see the technical problems and the technical seams of the film.
Okay. Are you referring to the repeat stock images of planes flying overhead, or
that, and also moments like, I don't remember which one of the French counterattacks it is, but one of the countless scenes where the Germans are in their trench, they are waiting for the French counterattack to happen, and they are all lining up their rifles, and there's the machine gunners. With the machine gunners, for example, you get one of the most notable examples of this. It starts with an image of the machine gunner and the feeder, the guy whose job is to feed the bullets to the machine gunner, lying there, waiting, anticipating the attack. The feeder starts to lean in towards the machine gunner, harsh cut, and it automatically retreats back into the previous image. Those type of things, where you clearly see that it's like it's hands down, it's the exact same scene, the same image that you are using, and also like the guy magically moves from leaning forwards to being once again being in the background. So you also have the editing goof.
Yeah, and also kind of prominent in the films of these times, I would say. People or the editing booth trying to trust on that the audience would not notice. But I guess then somebody noticed that, hey, they actually noticed these things.
Second. It didn't have in every movie in the 1930s. Some movies actually managed to avoid all of this. Looking at many of the film noir classics. So obviously, 1930 version of All Quiet is the hapdash trash version of the source material. Louis Milestone should get back into film school to learn how to direct and how to line up shots and what to tell your editing team so that mistakes like this wouldn't happen.
You heard it here first.
Aha!
Sacrilegious.
Give that Oscar back, Milestone.
Yeah, it could be also the kind of complexities of the scenes in such of a magnitude of a movie, but I don't know, I wasn't there. So also some, if we want to compare the differences between these three versions. In the first movie you have the butterfly, in the second movie you have the drawing of a bird, and the third movie you have we're gonna spoil everything. I presume. So presumptuous of me, but dear listener, we are assuming here that you've probably seen the films already. And in the third film, it's getting stabbed in the back. So those plot beats.
Which actually are, once again, semi-interesting when it comes to the differences between these films.
Yeah.
Because like you mentioned, all of these films have a different type of death scene for Paul Baumann.
Yeah.
And the way how I kind of categorized these were that the 1930 version has the poetic death.
Yeah.
Baumer reaches for the butterfly, but what we are focused on is his hand. His hand is reaching towards the enemy, towards his fellow man who could be his friend if it weren't for the war. Like certainly, yeah, he's reaching for the butterfly, but the way how the shot is being framed, it's so solely focuses on the hand that it gets kind of this larger context where you can say that the hand really is reaching for the Frenchies at the other side of the line. And the butterfly in that scene, to me, it was being shown as a sign of tranquility amongst all the chaos that was the trench warfare that they were going through. It's also the death where it's kind of being set up the most. The French sniper that ends up shooting Baumer gets a good long setup. We got cuts to Baumer, we got cuts back to the sniper. It's almost Hitchcockian in its build-up. Like, it really feeds into the anticipation. Does the sniper pull the trigger or does he not? Does some miracle save Baumer or does it not? And as Baumer is being shot, we only see his hand slowly retreating. And to me, that was kind of the film hinting at the or playing using the symbolism of the possibility for peace and common understandment fading as Paul Baumer's hand retreats back into the German trench when he dies. The 1979 version, on the other hand, to me it was the statement death of Paul Baumer. Baumer uses spare waiting time to just doodle like he used to do back in the classroom. So when he's trying to draw the bird in the trenches, he's kind of looking back into the innocence of his school days and the bird doodling that he used to do back then. And his death is instant. He's shot in the back by an invisible enemy, never shown to us, never built up to us, no tension. It's just a quiet moment, bang, he dies. And to me, that ending is the one that is punctual. Baumer stands up, period. Baumer is shot, period. Baumer dies, period. The end, period. And then we have the 2022 version, which is a kind of a hybrid death of Paul Baumer. It's a mix-up of the two previous death scenes. It's shiny and dramatic, like everything in this version. Makes a statement about this time about the futility and stupidity of war. But it also has that the death takes forever. Baumer walks up the stairs to die on the trench. It has this poetic take of Baumer's last moments. And it's, like I said, it's really beautifully shot. The statement here for me is more about the institution or a thing, the entity that is war, less than it's about what Baumer wants or needs or what he's looking back at before his final moments. To me, Baumer actually doesn't really want anything before he's being stabbed. Baumer also doesn't reach for anything in the same way as in the previous versions, and the final shot with the name tag collecting kid is literally outside of Baumer and his experience. So when the previous versions, they steadfast, they locked on Paul Baumer and his his perspective, his experiences in this war. The 2022 version's Palmer's death is a complete parallel to that. The Paul Palmer's point of view. It's completely alienated from his eyes. It's kind of like the audience also looking at the closing chapter of idiocy that has been witnessed by the audience for the past 2.5 hours. And like I say, I don't mean this comparison to hint that some ending is automatically better or worse than the other. I'm not saying that the 2022 death scene is a bad ending, mind you. But like I said, I do feel that all the death scenes do have an identity, and in my opinion, the identity these go like the poetic ending, the statement ending, and the hybrid ending.
Well, holy Christmas. That was some analysis right there. 1930, I felt that was kind of a dumbass death, dumbass ending. And the second one was also a kind of a dumbass ending. In a way that it is his lack of focus that finishes him off. Sure, poetic and quaint, sure. But at the same time I felt kind of angry at him for losing his focus.
Yeah, he kind of does make a stupid mistake in both endings.
But when it comes to the third one, at first I felt a little disappointed seeing how it now all seems to end. That is just a kind of a meaningless death in a way that it's not Paul's fault this time, I'd say. But just that it happens like few seconds before the armistice comes into effect. The way that he dies, that he's just stabbed from behind, close to the heart. Or to the heart, I don't know. So that very much emphasized the pointlessness of the entire conflict. And that's what I thought when the film ended. That was actually a pretty good one. Pointless death, pointless way of dying. Everything is pointless.
He's being killed by a French camper.
Yeah. And I kind of did like that he was walking up the stairs and seeing the light, seeing at least for a few seconds what it might look like when there is finally peace. And he reaches his peace. But if we want to introduce also the ending of the 1928 original novel, there is no butterflies, no drawings, no sudden deaths. What there is just a sudden explanation in a third-party voice that Paul Beimer died in the front on this and this day, and it was reported that it was all quiet on the Western Front. End of story. So it doesn't contribute on that front. So 1979, let's find out why you actually gravitate towards this movie. I felt that it was, especially considering what we have in 1930 version, it's a bit of a dull movie and experience because it's repeating actually the same scenes from the 1930, changing nothing. It's almost like, well, not everything, but it in many ways it copies the way that the 1930 movie was constructed. It's selecting all the same main pieces of the 1930 movie. It's almost like as if, well, we didn't really bother to read the novel. Well, let's just look at this 1930 movie and see what we can come up with. That's how I felt. But in my opinion, it's not bringing anything new from the original novel. Not really. If it does anything new, at least it has this voiceover of Paul Beimer. He's kind of the storyteller of the movie. And this was a joint British-American TV production, mostly filmed in Czechoslovakia, so it has that TV-esque feel from time to time. And it's something weird about the color of the movie. Yeah, maybe this is where also the TV vibes come on, because it is disturbingly yellow. The whole film is yellow. And it's
and flat.
And it's not because of the aging film or anything. It just happens to contain a lot of... I was like going through the film on a 16 times speed just to see kind of how the movie changes when you look at it on the whole. Okay, we have a yellow clothing, we have the yellow street, we have the yellow building, we have the yellow trenches. What the hell is going on here, director?
Yeah. Well, the simple answer to the question, of course, is the fact that it has Richard Thomas playing Paul Palmer. And I'm a huge fan of the 1990 TV miniseries movie version of Stephen King's It. Which is so goddamn bad that, oh my god. Or that's what I thought, and then I saw the new It, Chapter 2. Oh shit. That most definitely is an episode. But to get actually to be more serious for a moment, I actually disagree with you. I do think, like, you're right on the money that essentially what 1979 version does, it basically has the same scenes from the 1930 version. And it doesn't, like, when it comes to material, when it comes to scenes, when it comes to story, when it comes to character, it doesn't bring anything new to the table. In fact, what it does, it removes things from the table. 1930 version had the old veteran body.
Is that Cat?
I meant Cat's friend.
Okay.
The comedical sidekick that they get drunk when they go, strike the ladies.
Yeah, well, that guy.
Yeah, that character, whose name completely escapes from me. And that, for example, is an example of a character that is almost completely omitted from the 1979 version. So one could even make the argument that 1979 version has less stuff in it than the 1930 version. But overall, yeah, it's the same scenes, it's the same moments. But where I do think that there is a big difference is in the tone of these films. And that's where I do think that actually, where I liked the 1979 version more. A big part of that, of course, is Paul Palmer's monologues, which is the Terrence Malick-esque, the Thin Red Line. He used the exact same thing in the Thin Red Line, where the main character goes on monologues about the futility and the stupidity of war and the effects that the war has on him. And I actually really loved those.
Yeah, they're
in the 1979 version.
Basically text from the original novel, yeah. Those are good stuff.
But where I also felt that it did have tone-wise. Now, you mentioned in the discussions that happened, behind the scenes outside of the recording session, you made the notion of raw edge. And you mentioned that 1979 is lacking it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can see where you're coming from. I'm not making the argument that you are wrong. I'm making the argument that I had a different experience with the two films. Because to me, I kind of found more raw edge from the 1979 version. And that's not just the monologues. I like the way how the 1979 version goes straight to the violence, and then when it showcases you Paul Palmer's backstory, it uses, in my opinion, really effective cutting. You have Paul Palmer stone-faced, bored out of his mind, waiting for the attack to happen at the trenches. Harsh cut to his school years. Harsh cut back to the trench warfare. I really liked that editing choice. I felt that it had more punch that way than it had than Palmer's backstory in the 1930 version, where it's clear, sensical, chronological. They are at school, they join the army, they go to the training camp, they find themselves in the trenches. It's understandable, it's clear cut, really well done, but I did like the cross-cutting in the 1979 version.
Okay.
And then there are other moments that strongly spoke to me. I like the fact that, unlike in 1930 version, the 1979 all quiet, puts more blame on the fact that the school class joins the army on Paul Baumer's shoulders. Of course, yeah. The teacher is still the one who gives the initial propaganda speech. But then he gives a personal, intimate propaganda speech to Paul Baumer, who then goes and parrots the whole goddamn thing to the rest of his classmates, which does not absolve the teacher and does not entirely make it Paul Baumer's fault, but it it more heavily shares the blame. Paul Baumer is more the demagogue here, who is responsible for the fact that his friends follow him to the front. And also, it's harsher on the other kids also. This is something that in 1979 version comes in form of the character of Himmelstos, the drill instructor at the barracks. Now, in the 1930 version, Himmelstos is just this tiny man who is overjoyed by the power that is given to him and automatically goes into abusing the said power. But 1979 version has the moment before the training barracks, when Himmelstos is still just, the postman of the village, and it has the boys bullying Himmelstos. Which then, when they hit the training barracks and all the hazing starts, it frames all of that more of a revenge from Himmelstos' end. He's getting back, he's bullying his old bullies, essentially. And I kind of like that because once again, it put more blame also on the school kids' shoulders. And then it also goes more forward with Himmelstos. Himmelstos actually has a downright character arc in the 1979 version.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the 1930 version, Himmelstos just almost disappears from the movie, and then he appears at the war front and is quickly killed in the first attack that he has to participate himself. But in the 79 version, Himmelstos, it's made a point that the reason why Himmelstos ends up in the front is because he actually fucks it up during a hazing ritual at the training barracks. He's not sent there because, fair is fair and everyone has to do their part. Himmelstos ends up there because he just happened to be bully some son of a higher up. The institution once again fled in and punished Himmelstos because he just overreached with his power. He bullied someone that he shouldn't have. The hazing itself apparently was all fine for the military. He just happened to pick one wrong target. And later on, when Himmelstos lands his first attack that he has to participate in, well, once again, Himmelstos is at first a coward who has to be dragged out of the crater to participate. But later on, once again, because army is kind of a miraculous place, Himmelstos is the one that gets rewarded for some great courage, and he gets the Iron Cross. And then again, Himmelstos also is the character who learns a lesson of humility when he then returns back to the second company, the company that he used to bully. Himmelstos all of a sudden is really quiet.
Yeah.
And they show mercy to him. They say that, come in, sit down.
Yeah.
And the hostilities between the second company and Himmelstos, they just cease. And then later on Himmelstos dies, as he does.
That was nice. I think Ian Holm was a great choice of an actor for this particular role for some reason. And I don't know what to think about the non-linearity of the film, or the kind of cross-cutting nature of the film, but it's definitely a factor in the film. What I maybe most enjoyed about the 1979 version is that they made Paul more of like the lead character, whereas I felt that in the 1930 version, well, I really just felt that I was looking at a bunch of people as a group, like more like in the Unknown Soldier movies, where there is no particular lead star, it's just a group of people. But then people started to get reduced. There's always someone dropping out of the picture, and then finally there's only Paul Weimer. And it doesn't happen like until at the very end of the movie, when he is clearly now the leading character of the movie, because there's no one else to lead. So that was a big difference.
Yeah. On smaller differences still, since I really have to unpack why I liked the 79 version so much, I also liked the fact that I felt that the situation is kind of a more cruel, or the characters become more cruel in the 79 version. They do mention that they start to kill rats, not as a reaction to finding out that they have a infestation in the dugout, but as a pastime. 79 version also has the element of chemical warfare, and it does showcase the army sending younger and younger cannon fodder to the front. A running theme that it exists in the background of the 1930 version, but there it's saved for the very last moments of the film, when Paul gets back from his sick leave and reunites with his squad. That's the moment when they realize that, oh my god, now they are sending, what 16, 15-year-olds to the front? But in the 79 version, this is a running theme. They make a repeated remark that the troops are just getting younger and younger. And I also love the fact that this one has the moment when Paul visits Kimrich's mother and ends up lying to her about how her son died. What I felt that the film was lacking, however, would be I felt that the 1930 version had a better Paul returning to the school slash the lecture scene. Because here Paul gets, in 79 version, Paul gets this chance to call up the teacher on his bullshit, but Paul is not being called a coward himself by the young class, by the young schoolboys. Which I do think that is a shame. I do think that in 79 version that moment would have been actually better, stronger, if there also would have been the, you are a coward, Paul moment. And in all honesty, I made a joking remark about Richard Thomas as Paul Baumer, which I repeat, not the best performance when it comes to Paul Baumer's of All Quiet. Perhaps the weakest Paul that we have, but for some odd reason, it's the Paul that I connected the most. And it's not just the inner monologues. There's something in Richard Thomas's not the best performance that still connected with me. And I know that it's weird. I can't explain why. Perhaps there is some micro expressions that he manages to pull off with his face. Perhaps it's the laconic nature of his posture. But for some reason, like, even though I admit full-heartedly that technically he's not the best Paul, he might even be the worst Paul that we have in all three movies. But I still just somehow connected with the guy.
Yeah, sometimes these are just very personal choices. Sometimes you just connect with an actor, and sometimes someone else doesn't, and that can be one of the breaking points. Something that I haven't raised into the discussion yet is the kind of fighting in the 1979 version, because those scenes are sometimes... I was kind of chuckling at some of those fight scenes, to be honest, because the fighting is sometimes so stiff and slow, and the choreography... How the frick you say that?
Choreography?
Choreography, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Oh.
Is basically non-existent. And there is I don't see the same urgency that I see in some scenes in 1930, although, yeah, sometimes it's a bit theatrical as well, but I feel that it is still only 12 years has passed since the end of the World War I. So I think people still know how to make very realistic settings for the film, and many people have actually been on the front who are acting in the film, I would presume. So they have a personal connection to it. They are able to get some of their, mentality of the real war into the picture, whereas in the 1979 it feels like, oh, I guess I should punch now. There you go. Oops, missed.
Yeah. I perhaps was more just amazed by the fact that we finally had bullet holes in people and some blood.
Well, something that my partner noted about the 1930 version is that, in his opinion, put this into perspective. He doesn't really ever watch black and white films, so for sure he doesn't have that kind of a touching point on that or a certain patience or what have you. But what he says can be right in its own way, that because it's a black and white film, he thinks that the film loses something because you can't really see the blood, you can't see the colors of the battle, and that's a viewpoint. Yeah, you get all the 16 million colors available to you. They are all in the 2022 version, for sure.
Yeah, I also felt that there is, once again, to harken back in the talking point of the tone, I do kind of think, and this may just be the fact that we actually get blood on the 79 version, but I felt that the 1930 version, much like Edwin Linus, The Unknown, is perhaps a bit afraid to actually showcase you on screen the horrors of war.
Yeah.
Like you have a whole lot of stuff here. You have people blowing to bits. You have people being shot. You have amputations left and right. 50 amputations. You don't actually see any of the carnage.
Yeah.
That's not entirely true. Like I mentioned, you have the severed hands grabbing the barbed wire shot.
Yeah.
Which is, on-screen violence. One of the most iconic moments of on-screen violence. So it's to rephrase myself and to take myself back a little bit. 1930 version is not completely omitting violence. You get that. But I still felt that it was surprisingly low on violence. And the 79 version also it's not a hugely violent movie. Like, what you get is the same stuff that you got in the 1930 version. The 79 version just adds, gunshot wounds here and there. If you want, the horrific carnage violent version, that would be the 2022 version.
Yeah, so sort of. We'll get to that in a sec, for sure. And 1979, I did completely forgot right now. It just came back to me that actually the beginning of the film, it starts quite explosively. Like if you compare to the 1930 version, a lot of the scenes that are in the 1930 version that took like 1.5 hours to go through, a lot of those things just happen in, 20, 30 minutes in the 1979 version. And I kind of like that, gets you going. But then I was afraid that it will start to slow down as we progress. And yes, it did. It came to a point where I just started to kind of mock the scenes with my partner. And then there's this scene where the mother is asking from her bed that, Paul, why didn't you tell you're coming home? And we would just respond, I deleted my Facebook account. So
79 to play with open cards. It also has the most dumbass Paul. I would say of all the films. The biggest sticking point here is the whole Paul being stabbing the Frenchie in the crater scene. Which, in 1930 version, it's a result of Paul getting injured in the charge against the French trenches. And in 1979 version, it's the result of Paul somehow dumbassedly solo Ramboing in the front. Which I couldn't understand that what the hell was going on. Yeah, it's nighttime, and he's all alone crawling in a bloody no man's land that they have between them. Yeah. And then he gets stuck in the crater. And then the Frenchie shows up.
Yeah, and in all of the versions we see this crazy running in open playing field. I guess this is something that we just have to accept, that happened, and people were doing this. And of course, we see that in way older conflicts. Just people marching against each other and not having anything to blockade on the way, just starting to kill each other in the open playing field. That's how you solve conflicts.
Yeah. That's just the good old-fashioned trench warfare of the times. No problem there. But in 1979 version, Poe doesn't get stuck on the crater because he's charging.
Yeah, he's charging.
He just crawls in there alone in nighttime when they are not attacking for some goddamn reason.
Well done.
Yeah. Good job, goddamn dumbass.
And I hate to make this bridge, but speaking of dumbass, 2022 version.
That the violent Hollywood version of All Quiet.
Yeah, well,
with the kind of an annoying dubstep soundtrack, which really fucking drove me crazy.
Oh, really? I think it's trying to create definitely something Hans Zimmer-esque from, what do you call it? Intention, expansion, attention. What's the Green movie?
Inception.
Thank you. Because that has also those completely throughout the movie repeating horns or some instruments like that.
Which I didn't hate. I really liked them in Inception, and not the 357 trailers that came after it. But yeah, I guess that's what the score is going after. And I know that, it won the Academy, the Oscar for Best Original Score. But oh my god, if I didn't hate it. Absolutely loathsome sound effect.
And to note, okay, that's very strong take on that. I actually kind of sort of enjoyed those cues myself.
Jesus Christ, man.
But
get the fuck out of this podcast. You are fired.
Okay. Going. No, but where to start? First of all, there are these historical inaccuracies. Some of them are in plain sight for everyone to see. Some of them are only for historians to see. Some of the things that might be only visible to historians might be the type of tanks that they're using. The tanks that they're using in these scenes might be one of the less reliable tanks for Frenchies that they used during the war. I forgot what kind of model and all these really specifics, but it's not supposed to be, the tank of the tanks in the scenes. Well, that's fine. There is this particular scene that raises perhaps everyone's eyebrows. It's the flamethrowers and the use of the flamethrowers. Using the flamethrowers in such of a fashion that you seem to be in the French front groups in front of the trenches, and you're using the flamethrower to flame everybody up from above the trenches. Well, the historian pointed out that there's a couple itsy-bitsy problems with this. First of all, the flamethrowers would never be on the front like that, in full visibility for everyone to see, stationed above the trenches, and they wouldn't set the trenches on fire like that, making a complete line of fire so that it would be impossible for the Frenchies to move forward, because there would be just a ball of fire in front of them. And moreover, the Germans could now regroup and then start shooting the guys with the flamethrowers who are there without any kind of protection on their front lines, because they are the front lines.
Which they kind of do.
Yeah.
In the film, actually.
Yeah, that's exactly what they do. And I mentioned the tanks, but then when the tanks start approaching, what are the soldiers doing? They're shooting at the tanks with their rifles. Apparently to no effect.
To play the devil's advocate here, I took it that those were the first tanks that any of those guys had ever seen.
Okay, yeah.
In their lives.
Fair enough.
Once again, it might be historically inaccurate as all hell. Germany actually was, if I remember correctly, during the World War One, Germany actually was one of the leaders when it comes to military and warfare engineering. So one would think that actually the German soldiers would most definitely be the ones who have the concept of a bloody tank.
And they bloody well did. At least the Germans did have light mortars called Minenwerfer and some anti-tank rifles, which would be able to penetrate the tank's armor. But instead, these guys keep shooting with rifles for no reason at all, apparently. You'd think that they would have some military training on this matter. I know nothing about guns. Well, I went to army, I know that much. But even I know there's nothing to be gained by shooting a tank with normal rifles.
Yeah, which I guess in the end, they decided that they have. Because later on in the tank attack scene, the German soldiers then, or at least Kat, then knows to use the hand grenades and stuck them between the tracks of the tanks to disable them. Like they, all of a sudden, the German soldiers, they started with firing their rifles at tanks, and later on they actually know how to disable the said tanks.
Precisely.
In the exactly same scene.
Who's giving the orders here, man? And also there's this quick shot where the tank seems to enter the trenches, which was noted by this professor of sorts, and that's kind of weird also. If you're gonna go to the trenches with the tank, you're gonna have a hard time to get it out of there.
Yeah, that also. They got kind of a reverse out of the trench.
I guess they had to have that because of the gory shot.
Yeah. But I was kind of okay with that. You know, perhaps not the stupidity outstanding, but like how I approached that was that I kind of believed that the First World War, which is the one that they are fighting here, it may have been kind of the most traumatic of all wars. And I don't mean that in the sense of death toll or horrific instances. I'm not saying that the First World War was more traumatic than bloody Holocaust. That's not the statement I'm making. Or that, you know, the Holocaust did, the Second World War plus Holocaust did end up having a higher body count for certain. But what I'm aiming at is that the First World War was perhaps the war where the ways of warfare clashed the hardest. It was a giant-ass gauntlet of different nations, some of which had experience of warfare and had actually, you know, battalions of engineers figuring out new ways to kill people, like the Germans, for example. And it had the guys who honestly thought that the warfare is still at the stance where you take your horses and by God, it's something where you go with a sword. And I can kind of see that, you know, like if you put yourself into the perspective of a soldier or a nation that is less well equipped and like doesn't really understand what has been happening in the military tech recently. You have your sword and you are launching a chivalry attack against the enemy, and the enemy just happens to have a bloody machine gun or toxic gas on his arsenal. That clash, like that realization, oh my god, we are this backwards when it comes to our understanding what warfare is today, that experience actually perhaps could be more traumatic than anything that happened in the Second World War, not including the bloody Holocaust here. And you know, when it comes to the first and the second versus the Second World War, at least when it came to the Second World War, the entire world finally had a common understanding of where the military tech actually is at this point. Like, their poison gases no longer came as a surprise. And everybody had a concept of a tank, or a flamethrower, or a hand grenade. So, from there on, I'm kind of like, I'm not saying that this is how it was. I'm not making a statement of that sort here. I'm theorizing. But On occasion, I do play with the idea, with a question. I play with the question, if the people, when they went for the Second World War, if they were kind of a more pre-adjusted into the possibilities that they might end up facing on the front line. Whereas in the First World War, you can go there completely blind and then be surprised with your trousers are up in your ankles when it turns out that the crowds have a machine gun.
Yeah, my completely layman view on this is that this is kind of a proto-war, pre-war. We have gotten barely airplanes to fly in the skies and kind of experimenting with a lot of things, and then kind of fine-tuned them for Second World War, where everything was not so much of a surprise. Everything was more fine-tuned, tactics-wise as well.
And coming from that point, I was kind of okay with the extreme stupidity of the German soldiers of firing rifles at tanks.
Yeah, I think that could have needed a few subtitles. Why?
Perhaps, yeah. I was mostly just reading at their faces.
Yeah.
And that's like me just reading a lot into a shot. But I just took their facial expression like they didn't understand what tank is.
Yeah.
And like I said, not historically accurate. We are talking about the bloody Germany here. But I kinda okayed it for a possible theme that I hope that scene had.
Yeah, and I'm not crucifying the movie here because of historical inaccuracies. From all I gathered is that the movie is kind of... It's all over the place. It has some scenes where the soldiers are doing something that is extremely plausible and did happen, like trying to blow up or put mortars in the tanks, what have you. But then you might have trenches that look like something that would have happened in a different period of the war, as to compared to what they are supposed to be depicting here, like the end of the war, October 1918-ish. Small things like that, and then a few bigger things perhaps. There is also the thing that is not inaccurate, I would say, but notably in the 1930 and 1979 versions of this, you have the pointy hats, the so-called Pickelhaube helmets that they're using. But in the 22 version, you have the Stahlhelm, which is worn later in the war. So perhaps Pickelhaube is probably more common in World War I cinema because you can just make a distinction between the First World War and the Second World War, even though, as far as I know, there's mostly no distinction in a sense because they still did change to the Stahlhelms later on. So,
but sticking with the tonal differences here a bit more and griping more about the things that I didn't quite enjoy.
Yeah.
The 2022 version makes the decision of omitting Palmer's backstory before the war almost completely. You have like one scene here when they are, well, two scenes. You have the schoolroom scene and then you have them enlisting. You don't have the training, you don't have anything at Palmer's home. You don't have the teacher giving, well, you do have the teacher giving the lecture, but mostly, Palmer's backstory is completely omitted here. Among with Himmelsstoss and other characters that previously had played a part. It also omits the inner monologues from the 1979 version.
It also omits the ladies, basically.
Also those, yeah. They kind of show up very quickly, but the scene is so different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so in a different moment of the film that you can kind of make the argument that they just don't exist on the movie. It's actually weird how, like, having not read the book but seeing two film adaptations of the book, it's weird how different the 2022 version is. Seeing that this comes from Germany, where the book is supposed to be like one of the books.
Yeah, that was an interesting choice. Maybe it's all because they wanted the tonal shift. They didn't want to have those happy moments by the river. They wanted it to be kind of part of the conflict. Not a lot of happy swimming and all that.
That could be, but then again, this version gives Palmer and his friends a really lot of quiet time when they are not even in the trench. In this movie about trench warfare, and where they have, clean haircuts and clean clothes.
Mm. But I did enjoy greatly that this is bringing this movie a variation to the scenes, completely omitting some stuff, for better or worse perhaps, but introducing new stuff and kind of shuffling them around, putting them in different order. Heck, I was thinking at some point that maybe they're not even gonna kill Paul at the end of the movie, because what I paid attention to is that I was waiting and waiting for that moment when Paul goes back to his old classroom to give that kind of a monologue that yeah, war is not such of a great thing after all. And I was thinking that because it doesn't appear, oh, it must happen this way, that Paul actually doesn't die, but they do something neat where after the war he goes to the teacher and tells him his feelings about the war. And now that could have been a little bit more effective even. But then again, Paul has to die. It's his fate.
Yeah, on the other hand, I had a tiny bit of a problem with that approach. Because
Okay.
in the previous films, what was notable in the previous adaptations was the fact that they never actually established when the movies happen. It's during some time of the First World War, which meant that you didn't have the understanding of how much war Paul would still have to go on. And
It, is,
seeing how they stayed so long in the trenches, seeing how they stayed so much in the same kind of a locations or similar looking locations, even though the battle line does change and shift in the previous films, the trenches always look the same, which to me it kind of gave the impression or the feeling that it was the same continuous situation. It was kind of a limbo. Another day in the trench that never changes, fighting the war that never ends. And even though like the 2022 version is the most gruesome out of the three, you get torn up bodies, dead children, you have the blood splatters are all time splatterish here, but the situation still doesn't feel as nightmarish as in the previous movies, because in here it's not one continuous situation. It's more of a it's because the characters have a lot of quiet downtime in occupied by the ranches and other places that are not the trench. It kind of starts to feel that it's more of a silent, harmonious situations where they are at the ranch, where on occasion something gruesome happens. And I'm not saying that this shift in tone is wrong per se, but I kind of felt that it was wrong when you were doing all quiet at the Western Front.
I felt that the movie tries way too hard to win me over with the emotions. That was my big problem with the movie. I felt that it was overselling the violence. Very in your face violence at times. Blood
Yeah,
spouting
that it does
everywhere.
have.
And yeah, and all I know, or all I pretend to know about death is that it's not really that gruesome all the time. It's just somebody gets shot, somebody might be suffering for a little while more. Yes, there's some blood, but it's so theatrical in this movie at times that it kind of pushes me off from the mood. And it's trying very hard to appeal to your emotions. I would even go as far to say that the lead actor Felix Kammerer as Paul Beimer, he seems like heavily misdirected to me here, because somehow I don't buy these weepy expressions by the end of the war. These shots that are filmed on and on and on, like even after Paul has experienced death and destruction for over like 1 year in the war, as far as I know. And war is supposed to be dulling you down. You're dulling down your emotions, and then seeing Paul being scared and weeping again and again and again, it becomes somewhat unlikely after he's been there for so long, even if it's your best pal.
I took it that was a result of the film omitting the scenes of Paul visiting his home and in his inner monologues. Like, to contrast this against the 1979 version. The 79 version has the moment when Paul is visiting his home and he writes the letter to his mom, and he talks about his books, how the books no longer speak to him because of his experiences at the war, and how he has become this machine of violence that can only understand and speak of violence, and that's the whole reason why he can not fit home anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Why he has to get back to the trenches, because he has to get back to, quote-unquote, his own people, the people who only speak and understand violence. And the 2022 version has none of that. So I kind of took it that it was trying to compensate the lack of those moments through Paul's facial expressions. And that would be the reason why he was so teary-eyed. He shifts. There are moments where he's completely laconic, completely uncaring about what he's being ordered to do. Like when the general says that, okay, yeah, the war is ending like in the next 2 hours, but you are going to do the one final push, and there's no expression on his face. But on this next shot, or the previous shot, he's almost completely breaking down in tears. And I took it that was, the movie trying to juggle between the two realities that just exist within Paul, but the softer element of Paul that it can't directly address because it lacks all the scenes back at home, because the movie lacks the letter written to his mom.
Yeah, could be. I don't get the same effect of getting dullified during the war as in the previous adaptations. That's as far as I can. Yeah, that's what I know.
Yeah, I kind of battled with it. I would say I didn't get that same effect either.
Yeah, but I do applaud the actor Kammerer, and he was telling in an interview about his experience, because he's been a theater actor for so long, and then becomes in this production where he has to shift between all these different emotions, and it's not shot in a sequence, not in order. So yeah, he did have this Excel spreadsheet where he would put the different scenes and then write down what kind of a mood he would have to convey in that particular scene, then just try to kind of place his mood into that particular day. But perhaps a little bit too much emotion in the film.
Yeah, but we have been talking about the film, the stuff that was taken out from the in this version. But how about the stuff that was put in? Looking at the whole armistice plotline,
I actually
completely new and unique to this version.
Quite enjoyed it, and I think some of those scenes actually carried the story on the second half of the movie. Giving some background on the conflict. That's what also my partner was saying, that, well, heaven's sake, I don't know anything about World War I, blah, 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 and that it's great to have, this additional information on what the hell is going on here. So you have a bit of that.
Okay, because I was actually somewhat disappointed by the armistice plotline.
Mm-hmm.
I expected a lot from those scenes when I noticed that, when I saw the first armistice scene, when they were counting the death toll at the headquarters. And I noticed that, oh my god, it's going to approach the home front of the war. I was really looking forward to it. And the reason why I perhaps was a bit let down by that plotline was that I was kind of really expecting this deep dive into German psyche at the time. Examination of why the talk about duty, noble sacrifice, heroic death for the god, the Kaiser, which equaled God, and the fatherland resonated so much with so many of the young men in Germany at the time. I especially wanted this because many of the aspects and problems that would show up in Germany during the Nazi Reich already existed in Germany during the World War One, or even before that. Germany wrestled with the anti-Semitism predating the Nazis, as evident from the instances like the Judeshaltung, the Jewish consensus, which was an academic study by the military to root out or prove that the Jewish citizens of Germany were not patriotic, were not willing to do their part, and in fact were harboring a conspiracy against Germany itself. And when the consensus was eventually done, and the results showed completely the opposite, it proved that the Jews were actually patriotic and they were willing to do their part to defend and build Germany. The military all of a sudden just took the whole census and just swept it under the rug. Basically buried it. And then resurfaced it after heavily manipulating the facts. Like that's something that existed. It already had the notion of hardy young men gaining eternal glory in combat for the fatherland, way before Hitler made it official Nazi doctrine. Germany had started to divide Germany into ethnic Germans and others way before Kristallnacht. And even though army as an institution, to my knowledge, never actually did this, German soldiers were using Eurasian symbols that were really close to the official swastika, way before Hitler invented his official, now trademarked, symbol.
Yeah, well, swastikas were used all over the place, but after the Second World War, gone pretty fast.
Yeah. But German soldiers, and I'm talking about individuals here, not the army as an institution, but they did take swastika and tied it down, or something very close to swastika, something akin to swastika. And they took the symbol and they tied it to the idea of ethnical or genetical citizenship.
Started to identify the swastika with the German ethnicity.
Yeah, precisely that. That was what I was looking at. But they did that. So it's basically the Nazi doctrine before the official Nazis.
Yeah, I was actually hoping for even more of those political scenes in the movie, and because the original novel also, I feel that it's it kind of foresees what's about to come in Germany at the time, that there is this rising nationality and ethnical wars, so to speak, and it could have expanded on that a little bit more.
Oh God, so much, yes.
Yeah.
That's why I was really expecting and waiting for that to happen. And then what I get is that there's a whole bunch of music, some people going into places. I'm being served the symbolic contradiction of people, the young men of Germany starving to death, fighting in the trenches, and then these negotiators going into fancy lunches and drinking coffee in their well-maintained, clean suits.
Yeah.
Because they are doing the politics. I was served that, and I was served the whole notion from the general's end. How the social democrats are raping the country and selling it to the Frenchies, and how the pure craziness of the general, that the fact that he just had to have the final attack for himself before the ceasefire starts. I was given all that, and that was fine. Okay, but I was still expecting more of the deep dive into the psyche. I was expecting more political scenes and more from the political scenes. In the end, I felt that the Arvist's plotline kind of just left me hanging.
Yeah, the taste in my mouth after watching this movie was that, it wasn't really taking advantage of all the potential that it could have taken advantage of, and I felt like, my God, we need a fourth movie in some years, just trying to address all these things, because the movie has some great ideas. I think it's great that it's shuffling stuff around, because I had already read the book, I had already seen the 1930 and 1979 adaptations. Nobody wants to see, I think, the same movie all over again for the third time, or experience for the fourth time, the same thing essentially. So I was all for it, just shuffle it around. Let's see some new cards on the front. We were getting some of it. I didn't really warm up to the whole gore part of things, but when this political side of things started to pop up, I was like, yeah, more of this, please.
Yeah, that was kind of my experience with the film also.
Yeah.
Which I was surprised by it, because this is the four-time Oscar winner. And this is the new shiny Netflix treat movie. So I was actually, and like technically it's so goddamn good. I think this is the one that has the best location and establishing cinematography of all three films. I really love the movies. To me, the really hard violence wasn't a problem. I even kind of liked it. There were a lot of scenes that I really enjoyed here, which were overtly violent, like the opening attack where we are following behind the one soldier's back as he has his shovel and he just rams a French soldier and hits him with the shovel. Loved it. I loved the moment, the scenes when the French flamethrower troops attacked the German trenches. Loved those moments. Loved those scenes. So technically, really fucking good movie. But somehow I still felt that it didn't completely fulfill me. I was kind of disappointed by it.
Yeah.
It's a weird place to be. Watch like the Hollywood version and then watch the big money German production and then be like, hey, the 1979 TV movie. Really like that one. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, there's just something about this latest incarnation. Just trying to sell me things way too hard. I think the battle scenes are a bit too sort of a cinematic, not so organic as you would see in the 1930 version, for example.
Perhaps that, yeah. Yeah, that's an accusation that I can, even though I did love the images and I really loved the scenes. But yeah, that's actually an accusation that I also can land against the newest version.
And maybe even the makeup, the amount of dirt everywhere. It was like, seriously? Is no one gonna wipe their faces? Or the guy with the fork incident, let's say. He kills himself with a fork. I just kept discussing this with a few people. Are you even able to do that? Like stab yourself several times with a dull fork and actually kill yourself. Kind of gore for the gore's sake, I found. But let's discuss some quickies and some of the additional points on the way, shall we?
Why not? All quiet in the quickies.
The performance pedestal. This is a tricky one. You go first.
This is a tricky one. I have two aspects I really like in these movies, and those are the bombers and those are the Kaczynskis.
Yeah.
And I would say those are the two performances, the two roles, the two characters that gives where the real acting, in my opinion, shines. Those are the biggest roles that this story can actually have for its actors. So if I would actually separate them, if I would pick my favorite bomber and my favorite Kaczynski, so my favorite bomber would be Lou Ayres, who plays Power in the 1930 version.
Okay.
Even though I was fully I was really gushing on about Richard Thomas in 79 version, and even though he really connected with me, I do think that technically when it comes to performance, when it comes to rating performance, Luayers is the best. And from Kaczynski's, I would say Albrecht Schuss from the latest film. Best cat. Not the best character, in my opinion.
Huh.
Not the best version of cat necessarily. I'm really torn between, basically with all the three cats that we have. The first one who is the most jovial, most laughing, most funny. The second one that is perhaps the most grounded, and the third one which is perhaps even a bit of an anarcho-communist in the end, seeing how he despises all the figures of power and not just, Himmelstosh, but,
Mm.
Still, I do think that perhaps Albert Schuss is the best cat that we have.
Something that I really remember well from the 1930 version is this guy who is screaming in the trenches after an explosion that, "Oh, my eyes! I can't see!" So I enjoyed that performance, whoever you were. Good job. From the more main performances, this is a tricky one because I felt that Felix Kammerer's, as stated, kind of the performance may have been a bit misguided in my opinion, although great acting. But hey, let's give it to Felix. Anyways, next question. What worked?
After having badmouthed and cried about and griping over these films, I have to emphasize that all of them are quite exceptional movies in different ways. So I would say that's what works in all of these films.
What worked was, guess, just interesting to see how the performances or the techniques and the storytelling would change over the years. That was just fun to look at how it changes. But they are all movies that, I mean, they are very watchable movies, all of them. What didn't work?
From my end, I don't have major burn it to the ground level major flaws with these movies. I have a different set of problems, basically with all three. And those are problems that I'm willing to point out and I'm willing to talk about, but they are not problems that I would absolutely say that, oh my god, this makes this film unbearable. Even though I complained about it, I'm fine with the overacting and the clean uniforms and the perhaps bit adventurous nature of the 1930 version. I okayed the historical inaccuracies, and I'm kind of fine in the end with the overtly dramatic performances of the 2022 version. So no major flaws. I don't know. Perhaps the in 2022 version, maybe the armistice negotiations, as they were in the end done in the film, perhaps it was a bit unnecessary element. But like I said, that also is not a major strike against the film. I have a whole bunch of things, tiny things that I can complain about and gripe about, but I don't have like any one, oh my god, this was so bad.
Yeah, there were many tiny things, as you said. Some of those moments that just kind of took you off the grip for a moment there, like kind of the smudgy, messy, TV-esque cinematography quite didn't work there. But yeah. So describe the film in one word. The films.
From my end, one word for all three films would be harrowing. I've used it in the past episodes. I use it again, but that's going to be my adjective.
One of our favorite words. Yeah. Muddy. Certainly muddy. Dead landscapes with just mud as far as the eye can see. Will these films survive the test of time? Yep.
1931 most definitely. 1979 perhaps will be unfortunately forgotten. And when it comes to the 2022 version, I'm not entirely sure. It rides the wave now. I don't know about 10 years onwards. It may be that once again, it's not because it's a terrible film and it deserves to be forgotten. It's more of a Netflix is a terrible dead cell of a streaming platform which can't fucking advertise its movies. It's actually a running problem when it comes to Netflix. It treats everything on Netflix as a content and not as films, and that shows. So it might be that it's Netflix that gives this movie the killing blow in the end.
Could be. Okay. You really know you're watching All Quiet on the Western Front movies when
your war is awesome one-on-one lecture gets interrupted by perhaps the strongest sentiment of "I know the feeling, bro."
you really know you're watching All Quiet on the Western Front films when what we've got here is failure to communicate. That is my answer from Cool Hand Luke.
Also a classic.
Yeah.
Also about misuse of institutional power.
True. Did you like these films?
I did. I basically liked all of them, even though perhaps a bit different ways. And if I would have to rank them, I would say it's a tie on the first place between the 1930 version and the 1979.
Okay.
And the second place would be 2022.
I most definitely enjoyed quite a bit of the 1930, as already stated quite a couple of times here. 1979, I didn't really need all that much of repetition, and even repetition aside, I think it just wasn't artistically quite there where I happened to want it to be. So, for me, 1930 is at the top, followed far away with the 2022 version, and then his close buddy is the 1979 version right there. Well, would I rewatch these films? I don't really often go back to war movies, but I think I can just jump on my part already. Would I recommend? I would recommend 1930. I would not recommend 1979. 2022, it didn't strike a chord where I would go out of my way to outright recommend it either. Credit where credit is due, but it needed a little bit more push. Be it the politics, be it the consistency of the acting when locked with the dramatic scenes or the dialogue that the movie wants to provide you. It just wasn't quite there, and I'm a bit perplexed about the 4 Oscars, but there you go. Actually not. It's what the Oscars do, just perplexing shit year after year. So, yeah, recommendation only to 1930 version.
Okay, on my end, I would actually recommend all of them, with some caveats. If you would only watch one version, one adaptation, to be infuriatingly, inconsistently unclear, I would actually give that the 1979 version. And I would put, when it comes to like recommending these movies, even though I do recommend checking it out, but I would put the 2022 version as the last of the versions I would recommend. And I wouldn't recommend it as an adaptation of All Quiet. Most definitely not as the adaptation of All Quiet, but also just not as an adaptation of the novel. Takes too many liberties, in my opinion, to work as a film version of the story, as far as I've understood what there is in the novel.
Yup. It takes liberties.
Yeah. But I do think that it is a great war movie still. It's not perfect, as we've discussed. There's a lot that you have to kind of okay in order to enjoy it. You have to okay the historical inaccuracies, you have to okay some of the performances, you have to also okay the story itself. Like the farmer's son shoots cat in the woods. I get what was going on. It was going on about the cycles of violence, how those gets repeated on the youngest of us. The reason why the son shoots cat is because he saw how his dad tried to kill the food stealing Germans. So he takes impression from there and then turns it into a deadly action. I get it, but it kind of pissed me off. I kind of felt that was unnecessary. So those are the kind of stuff that you just have to okay with the 2022 version. But I do still think that it's an okay watchable war movie. Sometimes even good war movie. Technically great war movie. Really, really love the cinematography here. But like I said, it's not the adaptation of the story. And there's a stuff like the lack of politics. At times, even a lack of pace in the story. And I most definitely, I was one of those people who came into the Wikipedia entry to check out what awards it had won. Granted, yeah, most of them were like for score. I couldn't understand that. 2 Oscars for technical achievements. Well, fine, perhaps. The best foreign picture, what the fuck? Seriously. I couldn't side with the Academy
No.
when it came to Oscars. I couldn't side with the other awards that were loaded at this film.
Yeah, what the hell is with Oscars and them just every year picking some few targets that they just love to target. Here's the movie for the year. Look at this German war movie. Look at them denounce their actions in World War One and
yeah, part of that, of course, is how Oscars operate and the problems that go into the Oscar guidelines, which the guidelines themselves already limit the scope of how many films actually really have a chance and have a shot winning the Oscar, especially in movies like The Best Foreign. But still, like, I wouldn't have given The Best Foreign to this one. But even with my gripes, I do think that it's an okay film to watch. Just don't watch it as a film adaptation of All Quiet. Watch it as a war movie X.
yeah,
Kinda. And in my opinion, if you are short on time, even though I do give it a recommendation, this is the last recommendation for these ones. I do think we'll check the previous 2. I think they are better, even as films, even though not necessarily technically, in technicality sense. Looking at you, 79.
yeah. Maybe the stupidest scene in the 2022 version where they go again to the same farm or the same farmhouse, try to do the same thing, and of course everyone knows what's gonna happen there. But then extension of that thing with the kid in the forest, yeah. I'm with you on that one. And dear listener, would you recommend All Quiet on the Western Front? Pick your adaptation. Come on, tell us all your opinion on that, man.
Would you recommend going to the trenches and having a war? Tell us all about that in the social media.
Yeah, would you like to experience that? Tell us all about it. How numb do you feel tonight?
At this point, after watching 3.5 hour films about the First World War, not as numb as I was after the Chinese propaganda episodes.
Yeah.
Christ.
Yeah. Last time I had only 2 movies. Didn't have a whole bunch of background work either on that, but yeah, that was kind of heavy.
That was a reprieve that I was really thankful. Because the battle at Lake Changjin, holy shit.
And I also noticed that we have covered a lot of war movies in this podcast. I think we need a break once again from this line of work.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah. I don't know how it happens like that, but it just does happen like that. And in all fairness, war movies are often, like in this case and in the Chinese case, some of the big movies the people gravitate towards for whatever reason. All right, that kind of wraps it up for tonight's discussions, and I think we will be back in a couple of weeks again. See you on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, or wherever you want to find us. Do you want to sign out this time?
Until next time, dear listeners.
One podcast is on a mission.
This is that weird international cinema nonsense.
To bring international cinema the spotlight it deserves.